So everybody is talking about it. The cedi is not faring well against the dollar. For the year so far, it has depreciated by 6.9% compared to a total of about 4.3% for the entirety of last year. But why? Why is this happening? I thought there's only one place to come for the answers. And so I'm here at the Bank of Ghana, about to speak to the Director of Financial Markets, Mr. Stephen Opata. It's a bit of a problem. I mean, the cedi is not holding its own. I remember last year, the Vice President said that the cedi has been arrested. Is it out on bail?
Thank you. That's an interesting question. Actually, the cedi, I want to say that the cedi is still being fairly watched. Okay, it's not run away. It's still being fairly watched. I think whatever is happening this year has to be put in perspective. If you recall, the general story has been a remarkable turnaround for the economy, where as of May, we saw those remarkable turnaround in terms of inflation trending downwards. Our external sector has improved significantly. We're running a trade surplus. And all of this cumulated in we building reserves as of the end of May by about $300 million. So as of May, we had depreciated just 0.26%. So if you compare this historically, we're doing well. Since around May 20th, there were some changes in sentiments. And this has largely been driven by a resurging dollar, a strong dollar, on the back of Federal Reserve policy normalization. By that, I mean, for a long time since the crisis, the Federal Reserve has maintained historically very low rates. But due to improvements in the U.S. economy, the Federal Reserve started increasing rates. As I speak to you now, this year we've seen 2 Fed rate increases, and it's projected that there will be 2 more. So what has happened is that interest rates in the U.S. has gone up. And because of this, some investors that were chasing yield, they liked the Ghana story, but also the fact that relatively interest rates in Ghana were higher than, say, in U.S., or they were generally higher in emerging markets than the U.S. But because of the resurging dollar and improving interest rates environment, some investors are reverting back to the U.S. dollar. This has put some pressures on not just the cedi, but other emerging market currencies. So I want to situate this discussion in a global context, because the cedi as a currency, you are pricing it against an international currency like the dollar. So it's not domestic factors. We believe that what's happening has largely been driven by external events that have impacted the cedi as well.
Right. So to break it down, what you're saying is that it is the Federal Reserve in America that have taken steps that have strengthened the dollar. And of course, that means that comparatively our cedi has become weaker. So in essence, this recent, let's call it free fall of the cedi is due to circumstances outside our control?
Yes, I would say that the relatively higher depreciation this year, say compared to last year, has been due to mostly external factors that are having, in technical terms, you call contagion effects. They are affecting the currency, emerging market currencies, such as the cedi, the Argentina peso, the lira, the Indian rupee, the South African rands. Actually, these countries have even had even more a significant impact. They are really bleeding. So if you situate it in that context, then I don't think it's a free fall. It's a currency that is trying to hold its ground in the midst of very tight external conditions.
But it's not doing very well. I mean, from June till now, if we've gone from a rate of, what was it by the time?
As of May, we are depreciated like 0.26%.
And we're now at 6.9.
Around that, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
In a very short time. It's difficult to characterize that as holding its own.
Well, I think, it's important. Yeah, you are right. If you just look at that, then you say this is a currency that is suffering. But if I were to tell you that within the same period, Argentina has depreciated 50.23%. Within this same period, Turkey has depreciated 42%. The South African rand, a bigger economy, has depreciated 20%. India, 11.3%, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that really this is a currency that is facing some pressures in the midst of very tough external environments, but due to good management, we've been able to even sustain it better than in many other environments.
Your sheet doesn't tell us of the emerging markets that are actually doing better than us. Which ones are they?
I mean, the Naira for the same data has depreciated 0.61%, okay? Apart from the Naira and I would say the Kenyan shilling, I'm trying to compare it against currencies that have deeper markets in sub-Saharan Africa. Okay, so if you situate it in that context, and we are a more open economy than say Kenya, because we attract more non-resident investors than say Kenya, and therefore I think in the context of markets, a better comparison is say South Africa. In terms of our markets.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, clearly, some are doing worse than us, some are doing better than us.
Yeah.
So the only thing that matters is, are we doing all we can? And at this point, what is the Bank of Ghana doing to manage this? Because since June, it's not been easy.
Okay. Thank you, Kojo. We're doing a lot. And like I said, the currency, to a large extent, should reflect what is happening globally, but also happening domestically. We are in still a very strong external position. As at now, we're still running a trade surplus. By trade surplus, I mean, as a country, our exports are more than our imports. So I think we should continue with that trend. Fiscal consolidation. This government has committed itself to running a fiscally responsible budget. In other words, we have committed to running very low single-digit fiscal deficits. The government has committed to end the year at 4.5%. I think that commitment should continue so that we are running a budget that is well contained within the revenues that we are earning. That should continue.
But we're already on track for that. So it clearly hasn't had an effect on the strength of our currency, has it?
I guess what I'm saying is that in those days when we were running a double-digit deficit, the situation will have been worse.
Right.
Okay, so those are some of the things that we are doing right that we should continue. Inflation is trending down nicely. I think the August number just came out. I'm reading that it was 9.9%. But before that, it was 9.6%. So it's within Bank of Ghana's target of 8 plus or minus 2%, which will continue to watch that. The central bank, through its monetary policy committee, which will be meeting, I think, next week or a week after, should look at the numbers and have a good assessment and determine the appropriate action to take. I think the Monetary Policy Committee is watching this very carefully and is next reading to assess the situation and take appropriate action. The Bank of Ghana is also ensuring that we are providing adequate forex liquidity to the markets. We are still in a very strong position because we have good reserves. We have gross reserves of about $6.9 billion. That amounts to about 3.7 months of import cover. So I just want to give assurance to your listeners and those watching this that they shouldn't worry at all. We have adequate reserves to make sure that our banking system is still liquid as FS is concerned. We have stepped up our support in terms of liquidity to the banks. And
You've released some recently, haven't you?
Yeah, we have. We are doing that. I think in September alone, we've done close to 200 million in terms of sales to the banks to support their import needs and to support other forest needs that they will have.
But were the banks reporting any sort of shortage? This extra sale of almost 200 million in September, is it to solve an existing problem?
What we do is that we read the market, we assess the market and try to find out what are the pipeline demands in the market to make sure the corporates are able to import or meet their obligations. And our reading did show that there was a slight pickup in the pipeline FS demand. Because of that, we'll step up our demand in the market. Also, we want to avoid a situation where people feel that there's no dollar liquidity in the markets and therefore try to buy dollars or panic buy. We want to avoid that. So because of that, we've also stepped out our dollar sales to the banks. And that's the strategy we are pursuing. Now, in addition to that, I just want to assure your viewers too that between now and December, we will get proceeds from cocoa. That's about 1.3 billion. That should also support our reserves to continue to meet any demands that, as a nation, we have in terms of FS.
All right. Now, you mentioned earlier that this is largely due to what the Fed in the United States have done, by increasing the interest rate, and the effect of that has been that investment is now more attracted to the American market than to emerging markets, and that we're not the only country affected. But it occurs to me that Ghana, in particular, in terms of foreign investment, we've not had a very bad couple of years. We've floated some pretty decent bonds, even to the point where we feel we're in a position to start thinking of a century bond at some point in our future, and there have been some pretty good interest in our markets by investors. So I'm wondering why this increase at the Fed has had such a profound effect on our currency, particularly in this recent couple of months.
Could you, just to put this, to give you some numbers around this, in July, portfolio inflows to emerging markets was 12 billion. In August, it's been 2 billion. So you can see a significant drawdown in portfolio inflows. Actually, in some countries, there have been reversals. In Ghana, we have been fortunate. We've seen some reversals, but it's not that significant. But what has happened that we have observed is that some of the coupons that have matured, coupons that have been paid to non-resident investors, and principals that have accrued. Previously, most of these investors will have just positioned themselves to reinvest. We've seen some reversals, showing that the risk appetite for our bonds have reduced a little bit. That's why we have to be careful. So I agree with you that in past time when we issued our bond, we got a very good subscription and a very good rate. But I'm saying that since then, the risk appetite for EM debt has dwindled a little bit because of the developments I'm talking about. Another important factor that's weighing into this is the global trade tensions, mostly between the US and China. Yeah. That's also feeding into sentiments and making people be a little bit more cautious. When people are cautious, they tend to shy away from riskier assets like emerging market debt, such as Ghana debt, South African debt, and so forth. They wait and see when will things cool down. In other words, our risk premium increases. And I'm saying that that is affecting us a little bit, but the outlook is still positive because our fundamentals are stronger than quite a number of these countries in EM that I've mentioned.
Now, the Bank of Ghana, and perhaps your department in particular, concern themselves with forecasts and projections. So tell me, how do you imagine that some of the recent information coming out of Moody's and the IMF regarding our plans, the bauxite deal, how do you project that some of that analysis will affect people's attitude towards our economy? Are we going to appear as a bigger risk to investors? Will this cause even more damage to our city in coming months?
Thanks for that question. I think what you are raising is an issue of debt sustainability. That as a nation, are we watching are we debt sustainable? The debts that we are accruing, are we accruing them at a rate that the economy can support? And the number that I saw, I may have to refresh this. Our debt to GDP, I think, was around 64%. The latest bank restructuring that we did, we had to issue some bonds. If you factor that in, the debt to GDP, I think, goes to like about 69%. So if you factor all of this in the context of what we are trying to do, I think our debt is still sustainable. Now, this issue of this Sino-Hydro barter deal or whatever you might call it. I think they are still trying to clear out whether it increases our debt stock or it doesn't.
But you're Bank of Ghana.
Yeah.
You carry the books. So
Yes.
you tell us, is this a debt or not?
Well, you know, I have not seen the term sheets, but if I'm to go by what I have heard, that basically it's just a matter of swapping some commitments of infrastructure from the China for some amount of bauxite. Then it seems to me like it's a swap, but I don't want to hold brief for that. I have not seen the term sheet, and maybe it's probably we should ask for the term sheet and scrutinize it more. But you see, you just have to not just look at the debt numbers. You have to look at what this is going to do, the economic value of, say, that infrastructure that we have to talk about. Because if it's infrastructure that is going to add to the GDP, then the denominator is also getting stronger, and then the debt. So, but where we are in terms of debt, I think it's okay. And one thing that the Bank of Ghana is looking at is, you know, the classification that is used by IMF for debt sustainability. When they did this, at the time we didn't have that much market access, and we're a low-income country. We're having some discussions, and I think we want to project this further, whether we should still be classified as such. I think we are a middle-income country with higher access to the market, and probably it's about time that we look at that, because if you look at countries that have a lot of market access, Japan has debt to GDP over 300%. US is the same. So I think this is something that we have to reclassify, and that may clarify some of the things.
Right. So, I mean, is that an achievable process in the short term?
I know we've started some effort on that. We are going to talk to the IMF, that we have to look at the way they classify us, because we have market access. We are able to issue bonds. Non-residents are participating, maybe even too much in our debt markets.
Well, not enough in recent times, from what you are telling us.
Yes, but I don't think that is what we have seen. Like I said, was that some have not reinvested. But you also have to watch that numbers. You don't want to be issuing all your debt to non-residents. So that's some of the discussions we are having. Are we too exposed to non-resident investors, or should we try and limit the exposure we have to non-residents? So all those discussions are going on. Yeah.
Right. Now, it occurs to me that all the measures that you've described that the Bank of Ghana is implementing, a lot of them seem to be continuation of things that are working, and keeping an eye on things. But it seems to me, as a Ghanaian, who now needs more cedis to buy $1, that perhaps there is a requirement, there is a need for something drastic to be done to stem the tide and perhaps, you know, reverse it. Is there no such major intervention from the Bank of Ghana, or are we simply keeping an eye on it and hoping for the best?
No, we are managing the situation very carefully, and I don't think we are to the point where something drastic has to happen. If you look at Argentina were in a desperate situation. They had to, at one point, raise their policy rate from 40 to 60%. That's a desperate currency. We are nowhere near that. I've told you that our fundamentals are strong. What we are experiencing is a change in sentiment towards EMs. We expect that this will subside. We are coming to a quarter where we have strong reserves, and if there's a need, we will show our presence more. But fundamentally, we're on a good track. This is an economy that is better managed than some of these economies. I think we should continue with the good economic management story. We should continue to fiscally consolidate, and we should continue to look at our inflation to make sure its inflation numbers are achievable. That will also help us in making sure our exchange rate is stable. So I am quite optimistic that this will turn around. We should see some recovery before the year ends. Yeah.
Speaking of before the year ends, the dollar is going to get to 5 cedis, isn't it?
I don't know about that.
You project.
Let me tell you what, the Bank of Ghana does not, we don't target exchange rates. So I'm not looking at a number for the cedi. What we care about is stability. We want a stable exchange rate where businesses can plan properly, where businesses can forecast better, and we are working on that. We believe that once we are achieving our inflation numbers and we continue to monitor and manage the economy well, stability will be restored. Actually, this is a blip, and I really expect that we'll recover and beginning to see the stability of the cedi again.
So it's not that you can't forecast and tell us whether you'll hit 5 cedis, it's just that you don't want to.
No, I'm saying that that's not what we'll do at Bank of Ghana. We are not looking at the level of the currency. What we are concerned about is volatility. We don't like volatility, but we are not looking at the level. I can tell you that we don't even want inflation to get beyond 10%. So that is something we are looking at. And we believe that once we are achieving a level of inflation that is consistent with the production of the economy, the other rates, including the exchange rate, will fall in line.
So what is your volatility target?
It's tied to inflation. Once we are achieving our inflation target, then the volatility that we'll see out of the exchange rate will be consistent with that story. And I'm saying that where we are now is due to contagion effects, mainly from outside, and that should correct. We expect that to recover.
But if, you know, it's through no fault of yours, as you say, if it's someone else's activity that's causing our cedi to be weaker, then you have no control over whether it will strengthen or not, because it's up to someone else to do something in order to make the cedi strong. It's out of
I
your
guess
hands.
what I'm saying is that we run a freely floating currency, right? So it's subject to the forces of economics, forces of demand and supply. But that doesn't mean we'll just open our arms and say, oh, let's see this here and that. We will continue to take actions. We will continue to provide forex liquidity, which we are doing. We are giving assurance to the market that we have adequate reserves to meet that. We are doing that. The Monetary Policy Committee is watching this, and if there is a need to take other policy measures, such as raising the policy rate or reducing the policy rate, we do so. The government is also looking at the numbers to make sure that fiscal consolidation is on track. If we do what we are doing and continue to do it right, once these emerging market contagion issues slow down, the cedi will recover.
Help us to quantify the effect that the 5 collapsed banks, or shall we make it 7, collapsed banks have had on the value of the cedi.
Oh, that's a tough one, Kojo. What I don't know whether that exercise has been done, but what I can tell you is that, yeah, bonds have been issued due to this bank consolidation, to the total so far of about $8 billion. So that is what amounts to the change in the debt stock, right? But so that has had some effect in the sense that government had to issue more bonds. But I will not say that that is the reason for the slide in the cedi. Of course, it's increased the debt stock a little bit. I think the Ministry of Finance will look at these numbers and put that as part of the debt stock. But that's not the reason why the cedi is going through this. It's important that we clean up the banking sector, and I think that will bring confidence back to the economy, and that should even translate in a more stable cedi. So what the Bank of Ghana is doing in terms of cleaning up the banking sector, I think in the medium to long term should be positive for the cedi.
Now, I'm aware that, yes, like you explained, the debt stock has increased because of the issuance of these bonds. Is it a cedi bonds?
Yeah, they are cedi bonds.
Cedi bonds that were issued for the bailouts.
Yes.
Right. Now, obviously, the reason why we feel the impact when our currency is devalued is because partly because we rely heavily on imports.
Yeah.
And if we could substitute some of these imports, it would obviously make a big difference. Does the Bank of Ghana concern itself with that? Does the Bank of Ghana look into ways in which they can support in the substitution of imports?
I mean, that's not an area that we focus too much of. I think that has to be driven by other sectors of government. I think the Ministry of Finance has been looking at that. The Ministry of Trade has also been looking at ways of ensuring that export activity continues to be robust and well diversified. I think this, and the government is also doing something about it. That's why, for example, the government is talking about 1D, 1F, just to boost up industrial and agro-based industry. So I think that's in the right direction. But these are things that will take some time to have effects. But I want to say that if you look at our export sector right now, international trade, we are in a good position. We are running a trade surplus this year. Last year we had a trade surplus. Essentially, our exports were more than our imports. This is mainly on the back of improved oil and gas production. Gold also has been strong, and cocoa too has held its ground. So in terms of our trade sector, we are in a good position. But I agree with you that to the extent that we can be able to diversify our export base and so that, and also manufacturing, so that some of these things might be imported will help. But that, the Bank of Ghana is not focused on that. That's not our mandate.
Right. Now, you talked about the link, the rather tedious link between the bond issued to bail out or to consolidate the banks and debt stock, and its perhaps not so significant effect on the value of the cedi. But the connection is that it increased our debt stock.
Yes, it should. It will increase the debt stock. Yeah.
Is that the case in spite of the fact that we're told by government that they have had some negotiation with the IMF to arrange so that that bond is not classified as part of our debt stock?
I think what I heard was that that the IMF will understand that this cleanup has to happen. So they're not going to hold that against government, right? Because if there's a need to build up these banks and there's a gap, you have to finance that gap, and the government has to do that. So from what I've heard, the IMF accepts that view, that look, this is the cost of cleanup, and it's a necessary evil, you must do that. So I think it's that context that that discussion is being had, that the IMF accepts that this has to be done. But, yeah.
What does the Bank of Ghana think of plans to float a century bond?
I've only heard it, I think I've heard it on radio. It's something that has to be carefully looked at. My understanding is that this is going to be for long-term infrastructure. So something that we have to look at. Bear in mind that right now we've extended bond issuance up to 15 years. So some countries also issue century bonds and so forth. But we have to look at it that if we are able to do that, then still we are watching our debt sustainability numbers, and this is something that is used for very transformational things like the infrastructure they're talking about. So the Bank of Ghana, as an agent for government for debt issuance, will look at it and play our advisory role to the government on that when it comes to us. But that hasn't come to our attention yet.
I was hoping that your forecast might, might capture that. Okay, all right. So this is how I would like for us to wrap up. I mean, there are people watching us now who tuned in with the hope of getting an answer, finding out when they will be able to rest easy when it comes to the value of the cedi, when they will be able to go to the ports and know exactly how much they have to pay to clear their goods and not have it change from one day to the next. You're at the center of this. I want you to talk directly to them for a minute and tell them exactly what you think they ought to hear in order for them to have confidence.
Okay, thank you. What I want to assure the listeners that the Bank of Ghana is very much on top of this, and it's very much in the interest of everyone that we have a stable cedi. We've been working on that. Last year was a remarkable year where the cedi moved by just 4.8% on the back of a remarkable turnaround in the economy. This year, it's not been as good as next year, but we're working very hard at it. Once these emerging market issues are contained, we expect a turnaround in the cedi, and that Ghanaians should not worry. They shouldn't be rushing to banks or forex bureaus to change money, because there's no need for them. They can count on the Bank of Ghana coming back to the stability that we're seeing. I think what is happening is also interesting in this perspective that if you look at the history, in some years, we've had like 30, 31% and so forth. I'm not saying we are ever going to have that, but I think Ghanaians are holding us account. Ghanaians are now becoming used to a stable currency, which is a good thing. So when a currency moves by 7%, it's a very big deal. And they are holding economic managers accountable for that. So we want to assure them that they shouldn't worry, we're on top of this, and we should expect stability to be regained before the year ends.
Stephen Opata is the Director of Financial Markets here at the Bank of Ghana. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
All right.
And you're welcome back. So that's what happened when I spent some time in the corridors of fiscal power yesterday with my visit to the Bank of Ghana. So Stephen Opata had quite a bit to share, and we're going to expand on that and try and understand really what the effect of the Cedi's recent depreciation is on you and I. No better person to help us navigate those murky waters than our very own Norvan Akwahefa. Norvan, of course, is with the Joy Business team. Bro, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
All right. Now, times are tough, I won't lie.
Of course,
in the past, when you were coming, you would bring me some wache or something, but these days, the Cedi is not permitting your usual benevolence.
Of course, you know that. I mean, if you have an economy that is import dependent, that's what happens.
Indeed.
The depreciation of the Cedi is hitting everybody, or is biting hard, and that is not really helping things. We are hoping that maybe after today, when we have the Joy FM, Cedi conversation at the Cedi Center, that's at the University of Ghana Economics Department. I mean, there will be some solutions that the government and the central bank will pick up on to help in stemming the tide as far as the Cedi is concerned.
Well, it's what we do. Thought leadership is our business, and so no doubt there will be some thought leadership at that event on this particular issue. But let's come back to the basics. Norvan, the Cedi is struggling. We're told by the Bank of Ghana that it's actually not our fault. It's out of our control. We have an economy that is susceptible to all kinds of external factors, including a decision by the federal government of the United States to increase their interest rates. Somehow that affects our economy because we are an emerging market. But where did this all begin? How did we become such a sensitive economy?
Kujo, let's not go very far. I think that somewhere in 2006 into 2007, when the Cedi was hitting the roof as far as the dollar was concerned, the government of the day, led by President Kufuor at that time, with Dr. Bawumia at the central bank as one of the deputy governors, did indicate that, okay, why don't we redenominate our currency and bring it to the same level, make it stronger with the dollar. I was thinking at the time, when I was still a student, that, look, okay, so if we redenominate the currency, that's a good thing to do. But then, would you be able to touch the other fundamentals of the economy? Because at the time, we're still an import-led economy.
Oh, yeah.
And if you were, you need to begin to look at what can we do to turn the tables around. Can we get into industrialization, where we'll be able to then move the economy into an export-led? So you're not only thinking of having factories that will produce for domestic consumption, but you're looking at factories that would then export the product that they have from Ghana to the other region, or probably you're looking at going even beyond that. Those were the things that we're supposed to look at. But fast forward, we have not been able to deal with that. Yes, the government under President Kufuor is looking at how to deal with this situation, and that is why they introduced the one district, one factory. So these factories are not just supposed to come in and produce for domestic consumption, but they ought to look at, exporting beyond the shores of Ghana into the sub-region and also outside the continent, as it should be. I mean, just yesterday they opened a B5 factory, one district, one factory somewhere at Pampram, which is larger than the old B5 that we have around Tema, which is also part of the 1D1F. Good thing to do. But we need to, probably speed up some of these things and see how we'll be able to stem the tide. Because if at that time, when in 2007, when the redenomination happened, what did we see? 1 cedi to $1.
$1.
And fast forward from 11 years as of today, 2018, where do we have the cedi again? The cedi is, as of this morning, trading around 4 cedi 94 or 95 pesos.
Yeah.
That's commercial bank's rate.
So in essence, where we went wrong all the way back then was that we redenominated the cedi in isolation. All the other economic measures that we ought to have taken to restructure the fundamentals of our economy, we did not do.
Exactly.
And so on its own, the cedi redenomination could not stand as a measure to improve the strength of our currency. Okay, so now we are where we are. And the governor, the director in charge of financial markets is telling us at the Bank of Ghana that, well, we are not the only ones affected by the decision of the federal bank in the United States, and that other countries, Argentina and so forth, South Africa, are all suffering even worse fates than us. So in essence, we ought to pat ourselves on the back because we are managing the economy better than managing the currency better than other countries are.
Kojo, of what benefit is it when you say to me that yes, you have huge reserves, but yet your currency cannot stand the test of time? Okay, so it is a good thing that we have huge reserves. It is a good thing that we've tried to kind of control the dollar in circulation. I mean, it is a good thing that you have things happening, but I come back to the same thing until you are able to touch the other fundamentals. And some economics will also tell you that, first of all, you need to allow the cedi to fall to its natural levels. Because what we've been doing, when they look at it, they will tell you that that is an artificial way of holding the cedi against the dollar. And you don't have to do that. Your first point is to allow your currency to fall to its normal levels. Then you begin to put in the measures that you need to put in to shore up it and see what you can do.
Now, we'll talk a bit more about this in a moment because it is important. But of course, today is the day we say goodbye to Kofi Annan. And so let's immediately go to the Accra International Conference Center where Mama Biuso Abuaje is standing by. She's been speaking to a few of those who have turned up for the big ceremony today. Mama B there with a program ready to share some of those details with us.
Have celebrated a global icon indeed. We'll also hear tributes from family, from the children, from the widow, and then we will have
Right, we'll reconnect with Mama V shortly and get even more of the activities and details of today's event. Stay with us for that. All right, now let's talk a bit more about the cedi because we're feeling it. We're definitely feeling it. And that is what I want us to get an understanding of. I know Bloomberg has put together some figures that indicate the actual impact of the fall of the cedi. Novan, you can talk us through those figures, can't you?
Okay, so you look at the currency, and even this morning on Bloomberg, it opened around 4 cedis, I think 87 pesos or thereabout. As of last night, it was trading around 7 p.m. last night. It was trading around 4 cedi 91 pesos. That is on Bloomberg on their terminal. And if you look at it this morning, what you can see is that right now is at 4 cedi 80 pesos, even though it opened trading at 4 cedi 87 pesos. So this is just what you see. And what's interesting is that I'm sure that in the next 2 hours, when you go back and check this, you see the difference. But take a look at the graph that you see on your screen. Year to date, that is from today is 13th of September.
Yeah.
Yes. So 13th of September 2017 till today, 1 year on. Look at how the graph looks like, the performance
Crazy volatility
of our currency. Very interesting, as it should be. And that's what you see. And don't forget that the Cedi from January till today has depreciated by 7% thereabout. If you look at the Bank of Ghana figures, they are quoting somewhere around 6.7, 6.8%. Why is it so? The difference is because their rates is what they quote, and that is what is supposed to be used as the basics or the starting point in trading. And so per the rates that they have, that is why you see what you see as far as, or you will say that they will come back and tell you that, oh, it's just depreciated around 6.8%. But on the ground, yesterday, I'm sure Nancy was out there at Abusukai, at Nema Market, and some other places. And they clearly told her that even yesterday, some of them went and they were looking for dollars to buy. And when they went out there, it was at 5 cedis, 20 pesos. So we are looking at what the regulator is saying and what is the actual situation on the ground. And please, when you go to the Forex Bureau and you want to change dollars, they use the selling because you are selling your dollars to them. But we are using what we call buying because businesses need to buy, need to have dollars to be able to transact business on the international stage. And so they change a lot of cedis to get dollars.
Yeah.
And so it's the buying that we're talking about. And that is where you see what is happening that is affecting the depreciating cedi.
Now, Stephen Opata told us yesterday in the interview that it is the volatility that they want to control. They don't necessarily have a target. Because I tried to pin him down. I wanted to ask him, will the cedi reach 5? Will the dollar reach 5 cedis in the short term? Of course, in reality, it's already there. But I wanted to know whether their rate will get there. And he refused to answer on the basis of those absolute figures. He said they are more interested in controlling the volatility because that is what businesses need to know in order to plan for the future. But that's what I want to ask. Look at that graph. That graph from Bloomberg is indicating a crazy amount of volatility in the past year. Is there really anything on the horizon that indicates that there is stability in the future? Yes, we're depending on this cool syndicated loan to come in. But is that in itself going to be sufficient to level out that graph?
It's quite interesting because, Kojo, if you listen to Stephen himself, he talks of, the reserves, that we have, huge reserves. So which means that there's already some kind of dollars for us. The cocoa syndicated loan, really, from where I sit, may do something. There will be some skirmishes in terms of trying to help, stabilize the currency, but not really, because you talk to even some economics and they'll tell you that that is not the situation. The mere fact that it's a demand and supply situation. I need dollars to be able to go and transact business. The dollar is not available. So those who have are quoting some kind of price that I will have to be able to buy. But when there is more dollars in circulation, there's enough in the system, of course, wherever you go, you won't get it at higher prices. And that's how the situation is. The whole thing is demand, because around this time of the year, Kojo, what is happening? Traders, importers need to import things for the Christmas festivities, right? You also have certain companies who probably will have to repatriate, profits. And so that is what is happening. And check, a lot of the time, you see these things happen somewhere around April, and then around the same September, August, September, October thereabout, because these people are making orders, and when they are making orders, or they need to now carry the currency to be able to go to either China, go to either Dubai, go to either to the US, India, wherever they need to go, and then get these goods and bring in for the Christmas festivities. And so people need a lot of dollars. So I think that the central bank need to be able to look at the cycle and then ensure that around this time you can pump in enough dollars into the system so people don't have to be looking everywhere trying to get the dollars that they need.
They pumped in almost $200 million this month alone.
Yeah.
Is that sufficient?
If it was, wouldn't we see what we are saying?
Then let me ask you this. Dr. Baumia has, for the longest time, been the authority, when it comes to diagnosing our economic woes and, prescribing solutions, especially while they were in opposition. Having him as vice president, some would have considered that to be an indication of almost a guarantee that the Ghanaian economy will be benefiting from the right decisions and the right decisions only. He's the head of the economic management team. In 100 days into the administration, on the JoyNews platform, he said that the Cedi has been arrested. But in recent times, his conversation about the depreciation of the Cedi has been different. About a month and a half ago, he first waded into the matter by saying that this government's management of the Cedi has been better in a year and a half than the entirety of the 8 years of NDC. He quoted figures to that effect, but has been massively criticized for that. Let's look at the reality of it. First of all, is it true that they are managing it better? And secondly, does it matter that they are doing better than their predecessors when things are expensive on the market?
This is one big question, Kojo. But let me say that, I mean, in the management of your currency and how it performs, it's about how you go about it and how you're looking at it. And you may or may not, depending on which side you sit, say that yes, they are doing well. They are opening these factories, so they are tackling, the other side of it. And don't forget, I mean, just as Opata told you, if America today, or Trump and his people, decide that they will hike interest rates, why not? It has a wider effect, not only on Ghana, but other nations, because we are all using the dollar. Do you understand? The dollar is seen as one currency that across the world we all use in trading. And so that is one challenge that we have. And so it's kind of something that you have no control over.
But Norvan, that's the point I'm seeking. Because
but beyond indeed, that,
forgive me, if indeed we have no control over such a massive factor on the performance of our currency, why were we hearing from the NPP in opposition, Dr. Baumia and so forth, that if the fundamentals of the economy are weak, then the Cedi will expose you? And why were they making it seem that the poor performance of the Cedi back then was a function of poor leadership, when indeed it is more likely a function of external factors?
Kojo, as I told you, that is one factor. I mean, with external shocks or whatever it is, it's just one factor. But you are looking at what else are we supposed to do in the nation to help us, control what is, what we can, let me put that way, we can control. And so you need to look at, okay, we are an import-led economy. What can we do? What do we do to turn it around? Oh, okay. What are the things that we are importing? Do we even have those things in the nation? Can we set up even factories? Can we begin to do some export? Why are we just exporting the cocoa beans in its raw form, or just turning it into paste and then exporting it? Can we begin to set up factories and even come up with chocolate? Kojo, it will interest you to know that there have been demonstrations even against Ghana at some points as far as our cocoa is concerned. Why? Because some people believe that there is some kind of child labor going on our cocoa farms. And I remember the current Joseph Edu, the current CEO for Cocoa Board, indicating that, listen, we need to begin to add serious values, because at some point, Ghana's chocolate was one of the best on the international market. What's the production like as of today? So you're looking at even the production, the few ones you're doing, how well are you doing it? And how are you ensuring that those products meet international standard and can be exported? Because, Kojo, today, one thing we do not know is that exporters are smiling, whilst the importers are crying. That is the thing. So if you take a company like Blue Skies, let me use them as an example. Because they are exporting, at the moment, what is happening? When they export, they get dollars, right?
Which is more cities now.
Which is more cities. But at the time when the city probably was not, depreciating, and so you go back to somewhere last year, around the same time, I'm sure if you go to Blue Skies, they will tell you that they were losing a lot. So when your currency is strong, your exporters lose out.
So back to the question, is it true that this administration is managing the city better than the previous administration? And if it is true, does it matter?
Well, that's the question you realize that I've been trying to run away from.
Please don't.
I don't want to be I think that our viewers will be the best to judge.
But numbers don't lie, Norvan.
Numbers, they don't.
Yes.
They
so
don't.
what are the numbers saying?
I think that they are currently doing their best. And that's why I told you that at least in Accra alone, I'm aware they've been able to set up our 4 factories, under this 1D, 1F thing that they are doing. And if we give ourselves next 2-3 years, 4 years, if each district over 200 districts that we have, if each of them we're going to have a factories that we're not just going to produce for local consumptions, but factories that we're going to export as well, and we're going to add value to a lot of the raw materials. So you're looking at cashew, you're looking at cocoa, you're looking at all the things that you're looking for. Even this bauxite deal that has become something else with all the confusion surrounding it. If what they say they want to be able to do, even though I doubt in 3 years you'll be able to set up a full factory to be operational, to give you, produce all the things that you are talking about. If they're able to do it, if there's a way to do it and it's done, Kwejo, they will be able to solve at least 50 to 60% or 70% of the problem, and that would lead to resolving, the currency's challenges that it faces. You understand? And please, also, having multinational companies in our country is good. But I always say that think of ensuring that they do not have to always repatriate profits, which means that Ghanaian ownership of some of these companies should also be looked at. Then you're thinking of listing them on the stock exchange, which will help increase, trading on your stock exchange as well, and make it relevant on the international stage. And then you make sure that around that April that I was talking about, you don't have all of them trying to wind up the accounts and then, okay, how much profit did we make? And then they change this into dollars and move it out of your economy, which also hits the Cedi and its performance.
But how well does this government, support local businesses? It's a continuing debate, isn't it? Especially the big ones. It appears that they are more often clashing with government rather than being supported by government. Are we making a mistake there?
No, well, I think that successive governments and the way they have handled these multinational businesses, and then ensuring that, even government, at least we are aware that these oil blocks that will be auctioned, you're talking of some percentage going 5%, which should be local partnership.
5%.
So, okay.
5%. So 95 is going into. Anyway, Mnoban, we have to talk more about this at the earliest opportunity.